I wrote this book because I desperately needed a book like this for the 10-year-old who found porn for the first.
Blake reposted the clip and, as expected, tried to layer her own intellectual spin on top of it, almost as if she were attempting to out-philosophize the original message. The underlying question practically wrote itself. Did she really lose $40 million because she was unfairly labeled a mean girl, or was it simply the natural consequence of how she has behaved? The fact that she and Ryan Reynolds have allowed things to escalate this far doesn't reflect well on either of them. What makes the situation more striking is how her attempt to redirect attention ahead of the trial seems to have backfired. Instead of shifting the narrative, her social media activity is arguably putting Justin Baldoni in a stronger position. By staying quiet, he appears composed and controlled, while her posts risk looking reactive. Recently, Blake Lively shared a video about Justin Bieber, highlighting his journey through fame and criticism. She added an emotional caption about how people we admire can be hurt and never fully recover. On the surface, it came across as heartfelt, but the timing and context made many people question whether the message was really about Bieber at all. Instead, it felt like an attempt to tap into the goodwill surrounding his return to the spotlight and redirect some of that sympathy toward herself. That strategy didn't land well. Critics pointed out that it felt calculated rather than genuine, which is often the risk when someone tries to attach themselves to a moment they didn't create. Public perception tends to favor authenticity, and when something feels forced, audiences notice quickly. Online reactions reflected that skepticism. Some accused her of deflecting from her legal situation, while others suggested she was trying to repair her image by aligning herself with a trending narrative. The comparison to other public figures in the past only added to the sense that this is a recurring pattern, rather than a one-off misstep. Her close association with Taylor Swift also complicated the optics, especially considering Kanye West's history with Swift and the way Justin Bieber once appeared to side in that broader cultural moment. For some observers, that made Blake's post feel even less consistent, as if it ignored past dynamics entirely. At the core of the criticism is a broader issue: the difference between curated public relations and genuine public response. When someone becomes too reliant on shaping narratives through messaging, it can become difficult to anticipate how real audiences will react. People don't always respond the way a PR strategy predicts, and when they don't, the disconnect becomes obvious. In this case, her continued posting during an active legal situation may be doing more harm than good. Rather than strengthening her position, it risks amplifying scrutiny while simultaneously making Baldoni's silence look strategic and effective. In a situation like this, restraint can sometimes carry more weight than any statement, and right now, that contrast is working in his favor. Many people believe Blake Lively's core issue is a pattern of trying to attach herself to moments where someone else is receiving positive attention, with the apparent hope of sharing in that goodwill. The problem, critics argue, is that these attempts rarely come across as authentic, and instead of strengthening her image, they often invite more scrutiny. When audiences sense that something is calculated rather than genuine, the reaction can be swift and unforgiving, and that seems to be what's happening here. Her recent comments about experiencing both the highest highs and lowest lows of her life add a personal layer, but they also highlight how turbulent this period has been for her publicly. At the same time, her frequent Instagram activity during an ongoing legal situation appears to be having the opposite of its intended effect. Rather than shifting sympathy in her favor, it is inadvertently making Justin Baldoni look more composed and in control. His decision to remain largely silent creates a stark contrast, reinforcing the idea that restraint can sometimes be more powerful than constant engagement. And in this context, that silence is being interpreted by many as a strategic advantage. The broader criticism goes beyond just social media strategy and touches on how she has handled serious issues in the past. Some observers connect today's backlash to earlier moments when she publicly supported influential figures despite serious allegations against them. For example, during the promotion of Cafe Society in 2016, which was directed by Woody Allen, she defended her decision to work with him by emphasizing her personal experience and cautioning against judging situations without full knowledge. A similar response followed in 2017 when allegations against Harvey Weinstein became public. While many in Hollywood strongly condemned him, her comments focused on her own experience rather than directly addressing the accusations, which some critics felt came across as evasive. Although she later expressed general support for victims, the lack of a direct stance at the time has remained part of the conversation around her public image. That history is now being revisited alongside her more recent actions, including a speech at the Time 100 Gala where she referenced her mother's influence in a deeply personal and emotional way. While that portion resonated with many, the speech became more controversial when she connected her own situation to that of Giselle Pelicot, quoting a powerful statement about shame and accountability. The intention may have been to align herself with a broader message of strength, but the comparison did not sit well with everyone. Critics pointed out a disconnect between invoking the words of someone associated with real trauma and simultaneously being involved in a legal strategy that, according to reports, has sought to keep certain details private. For some, this contrast made the moment feel less like solidarity and more like an attempt to borrow emotional weight from a story that carries far deeper real-world consequences. All of this feeds into a growing perception that her messaging lacks consistency. The Justin Bieber Instagram story, her past public statements, and her recent speech are being viewed not as isolated incidents, but as part of a larger pattern. Whether that interpretation is entirely fair or not, it's clearly shaping public opinion. In situations like this, perception often matters as much as intent, and right now, the perception is working against her. Meanwhile, Baldoni's low-profile approach continues to stand in contrast, reinforcing the idea that sometimes doing less publicly can yield more control over how a situation unfolds. I kid you not, many critics are calling this one of the most questionable PR moves in the entire situation. To them, it doesn't come across as damage control, but rather as a defensive reaction that risks making things worse. The narrative being pushed that Blake Lively, SUFFERED, massive financial losses purely because of a mean girl label has raised eyebrows, especially given the scale of the numbers being discussed. Claims that her reputation alone cost tens of millions of dollars have led people to question whether the issue is really about public perception, or about how that perception was shaped in the first place. When reports surfaced that she was seeking around $40 million in damages, with additional claims totaling well over $100 million tied to lost earnings and business ventures, the conversation shifted from sympathy to skepticism. For many observers, it became less about the label itself and more about whether those losses could realistically be attributed to a single narrative or individual. Her legal team has pointed fingers at Justin Baldoni, arguing that he and his associates were responsible for damaging her image. However, other reports suggest that the spikes in negative attention may have been influenced by her own promotional strategies and public appearances, rather than a coordinated smear campaign. That contradiction has become a central weakness in her argument. Adding to that, past media coverage from her time on Gossip Girl has resurfaced, reminding audiences that the mean girl narrative didn't suddenly appear. It had been part of public discussion for years. This directly challenges the claim that such labels only emerged recently, and it complicates the idea that her current situation is entirely the result of new events. The controversy deepened further with allegations that Baldoni had made insensitive comments about her weight after childbirth, claims that painted him in a highly negative light. But according to leaked internal communications reportedly involving Sony Pictures executives, the conversation around her appearance may have originated elsewhere. If those reports are accurate, they suggest that studio-level discussions, not the director, were responsible for those remarks, which significantly alters the narrative. Instead of reinforcing her claims, this development has led some to argue that Baldoni was unfairly blamed, while others see it as an example of how complex and opaque behind-the-scenes dynamics in Hollywood can be. Either way, the leak has shifted public perception and added another layer of doubt to her version of events. Her legal strategy has also drawn scrutiny, particularly the decision to involve Jennifer Freyd, known for developing the concept of Davo deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. On paper, bringing in a respected expert to support her claims might seem like a strong move. However, critics argue that expert analysis is only as reliable as the information it's based on. Reports that key documents such as a letter in which Lively allegedly described having significant influence and authority on set, not included in the materials reviewed by the expert, have raised serious questions. If true, that omission could undermine the entire argument built around power imbalance, which is central to claims of institutional betrayal. Without a clear disparity in power, the framework used to support her case becomes much harder to defend. All of this leaves her legal team facing a difficult challenge if the case proceeds to trial. Opposing lawyers would likely focus on these inconsistencies, questioning whether the expert's conclusions were formed with a complete understanding of the situation. Even small gaps in evidence can become major points of contention in court, and here the gaps appear significant. Meanwhile, Baldoni's relatively quiet public stance continues to work in his favor, reinforcing the impression that he is letting the situation unfold without adding fuel to the fire. That contrast between an active, highly visible defense strategy and a restrained, low-profile response has become one of the most defining aspects of the entire dispute. In the middle of all this, Ryan Reynolds has stepped in publicly, offering support for his wife during a widely viewed interview. His comments focused on her character and resilience, presenting a more personal and emotional counterbalance to the legal and media narratives. While that show of support resonates with some audiences, others see it as part of a broader effort to stabilize her public image. Ultimately, the situation remains highly polarizing, with each new development continuing to shape how the public interprets what's really going on behind the scenes. I don't shy away from saying, this is the strategy behind that interview. It felt pretty transparent to a lot of viewers. The idea seemed simple: lean on Ryan Reynolds' massive popularity and likability to rebuild goodwill around Blake Lively right before a major legal moment. On the surface, it was framed as a supportive husband speaking from the heart, emphasizing pride and admiration. But many fans quickly picked up on the timing and context, interpreting the appearance less as a spontaneous emotional gesture and more as a carefully planned media move aimed at reshaping the narrative ahead of the trial. That contrast between what was presented and what people believed was actually happening only fueled more skepticism. Things became even more complicated when viewers noticed additional context around the interview itself. Reports and community notes pointed out that Reynolds' appearance was tied to a sponsored segment connected to Acadia Pharmaceuticals, where he has been involved in advocacy work related to Parkinson's disease. Once that detail started circulating, it shifted how people interpreted the entire segment. What might have initially felt like a heartfelt moment began to look, to some, like part of a broader promotional effort. Add to that the inclusion of his business ventures like Mint Mobile and aviation. Jinan critics argued that the interview blurred the line between personal storytelling and brand amplification. Whether intentional or not, it reinforced the perception that multiple layers of marketing were at play. That perception undercut the emotional impact of his words. When he spoke about integrity and pride, some viewers questioned whether those sentiments were being expressed in a purely personal capacity or within a structured commercial setting. In today's media environment, where audiences are highly attuned to sponsorships and branding, even a hint of undisclosed context can significantly change how a message is received. Instead of strengthening Blake's position, it risked adding another layer of doubt to an already polarizing situation. At the same time, questions have emerged about Reynolds' actual role in the legal process. Reports that he may be listed as a potential witness introduce an interesting dynamic. In many legal settings, witnesses are kept out of the courtroom until they testify, which can limit their visible presence during proceedings. While that can be a standard legal approach, critics have interpreted it as a convenient way for him to remain publicly supportive while avoiding the day-to-day intensity of the courtroom. Whether that interpretation is fair or not, it adds to the ongoing narrative that much of this situation is being carefully managed behind the scenes. Then there's the discussion around how art and entertainment may be intersecting with the dispute. Some viewers have drawn connections between elements in Deadpool and Wolverine and Justin Baldoni, suggesting that certain characters or moments feel like indirect references. The inclusion of fictional personas like Gordon Reynolds and other metahumor elements has long been part of Reynolds' comedic style, but in this context, audiences are reading into those choices more deeply. Similarly, details in it ends with us such as acknowledgments or thematic overlaps have been interpreted by some as subtle commentary. Whether these parallels are intentional or simply coincidental is open to debate, but the fact that people are connecting them at all shows how closely every move is being analyzed. Ultimately, what stands out is how layered this entire situation has become. It's no longer just about a lawsuit or a few public statements, it's about perception, timing, media strategy, and how modern celebrity culture operates at the intersection of personal life, business, and storytelling. Every interview, post, and creative decision is being examined not just for what it is, but for what it might imply. And in that kind of environment, even well-intentioned actions can be reinterpreted in ways that shift the narrative in unexpected directions. She used the official credits of a major film to slip in an inside joke with her husband about a made-up character, one that seemed to take a jab at her director. What makes it more striking is that while she acknowledged this fictional name, Blake Lively left out Justin Baldoni entirely from her thank you list. The very person who secured the rights to the book, helped develop the project, directed it, and starred in it. His absence from the special thanks section didn't go unnoticed. Even so, he appears to come out ahead by weathering the initial backlash and allowing the situation to unfold on its own. By keeping a low profile and relying on the legal process, he effectively let the narrative shift, with critics arguing that the Hollywood couple ended up damaging their own image in the process.